What's up everybody, it's your boy Abdullah from Ather here, and today I'm going to bring you a newer deck in the format. We had it last format, but I think it's really in a position to succeed this format, and that is pure Tri-Brigade or Tri-Brigade with Rescue Cat. I'm going to go into why I think this is the best version of the deck for this format, and why I think you should play it. So we'll play the 3 copies of Tri-Brigade Kit. Kit's great, it's a foolish barrel for our deck, and it helps us load the graveyard up with names and continue our lines of play. Most of our lines start with sending Kit to the graveyard so we can set up the grave to really go and pop off. After the Kit, we'll play the triple Nerval. I think you have to max out on Tri-Brigade names, and I think this is standard, like nobody's playing less than this, unless you're playing some weird build. But in pure, we definitely want to see Nerval. We want to get this guy in the graveyard. He is our searcher, so when he gets sent to the graveyard, we get to add a new Tri-Brigade monster from our deck to our hand, and this lets us extend through tons of plays, and it lets us play through hand traps, and the card is fantastic. Then we'll play the 3 copy of the Tri-Brigade Fractal. Fractal has an interesting effect where he's of the Tri-Brigades, he lets you discard himself from hand and then foolish another Tri-Brigade. So you'll go Fractal, dump Kit, Kit will dump Nerval, and then Nerval will add whatever piece you're missing. But Fractal's effect also works when he's on the field, so you can send him from the field to the graveyard. So you can summon Fractal, use his effect to summon a Tri-Brigade from your extra deck, then send Fractal to load your graveyard up, enough for a second Tri-Brigade follow-up. So again, we want to max out on him. He has 1900 attack, which is actually relevant to beat over Appaloosa after it's used to negate. Then we play the 3 copy of Karas. Now, I've seen some lists play 2 Karases. Because we are playing Rescue Cat and the fact that Karas is a beast, it helps us increase our beast count without including too many non-Tri-Brigade beasts or beasts that are essentially Garnets or Vanillas in our deck, so we want to max out on him. Most of the time we play through hand traps and we play through disruption is through Karas, so we definitely want to open up this guy. Plus, Karas can lead us to some cool plays where we can go Karas, dump Kit, Karas, dump Nerval to get a plus off of that. So the card is honestly just fantastic, and you can always discard like a Rescue Cat or Post side. If you side an Alpha, you can discard Alpha. We play another hand trap that we can discard off Karas. The card is a crazy extender for us, and that's why we need him, which is why you maxed out on him. And I think that this is perfect for a list like this, the 3 of each Tri-Brigade. You really want to open up one in your hand as well as another starter, and they all kind of act as starters on their own except Karas, but Karas is like the only real extender that we have in our deck, so we're going to max out on that. Now to go with that, we go for the reason to play this deck, which is Rescue Cat. One of the issues that I had with Tri-Brigade was when I was playing it previous format with Zoo, it did feel like a lot of the time I was just ending with like 4 cards. Like sure, one of those cards was like a Revolt and an Appaloosa, and sometimes I'd have a Dragon Lord or a Dragon Thrower as well, but most of the time it didn't feel that great to play that. But with Rescue Cat, we can usually end our turn with like 4 cards in hand as well as having like a similar board setup as well. And that is really strong for both for follow-up as well as we have more selection when it comes to our Bear Brum and our Farragut. Like now we're not forced to put a card we want to keep in our hand at the bottom of our deck because we have so many options, so many choices, we can make better decisions. Cat also by itself can end on an insane board. It'll search you a hand trap, it'll let you go through a sure egg, and you get a bunch of searches. The card is insane, and the basic premise behind it is that you normal the Cat, use this effect to send itself to the graveyard, summon out a Kit and Karas, then Kit will trigger, Kit will dump Nerval, Nerval will add the Fractal, or another Karas if you want to extend with it. And then you'll link those 2, when you link those 2 monsters, you're going to summon Farragut. Farragut will summon the Tri-Brigade from hand, and then you continue your lines there. So you get into Appaloosa, you get into the Bear Brum, you get into your Revolt, you're just a happy guy. And I know that people say that Rescue Cat gets hit by like every hand trap. The thing is that this deck kind of, like all the normals you could play essentially get hit by every single hand trap, right? Like the same things that stop the Zoo Engine also stop this. So unless you wanted to play the Bird deck, but the Bird deck has its own issues. I just believe that a card like this, Rescue Cat, like the payoff is so massive, and you do play some cards that help you resolve its effect that it's just insane. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, yes, I lose the X hand trap, but if you don't have X hand trap, you probably just lose the game. And so I'll take that chance, right? Because even if my opponent plays like 9-something hand traps, like that would just shut down Rescue Cat on its own, that's still like 50-50. And usually, even when this does get interrupted, you can still play because of Karas' effect. So it's just great. And when the card resolves, like you just win the game. And so, of course, we're gonna max out on that. Again, there's other synergy with it as well because it's a beast. It works with our Tri-Brigades. So 3 Rescue Cat. And that's it for the monsters that we play. For our engine, we'll max on the Tri-Brigades, on the 3 Rescue Cats. Now we go into the hand traps. And one of the reasons to play Tri-Brigade is because of the amount of hand traps you can main in it. And this format is a format where most decks are playing, I want to say like 9 to 15 hand traps. In this deck, I think we come up to about 13. Obviously, that number can be changed based on your play style, but we decided to settle on 13 for today. So we played the 3 copies of Cypher Gear Gamma, and of course the 1 driver. Gamma is great because 1, it works with the Rescue Cat. And Rescue Cat will remove itself from the field. You can reveal Gamma there and stop their line there. But also a lot of decks, they don't really have a great spot to Droll us, for example. So usually you might see a Droll on a Tenki, on the resolution of a Nerval, things like that. And just going second, Gamma's a fantastic hand trap to have just because it is like a solemn strike from hand, which you can use on turn 0. So the card is insane, and in a deck like this, we can really take advantage of Gamma, and we do have ways, especially Cat Send, like that's like a FTK almost. Like Rescue Cat Send, they go Ash, you go Gamma, extend hand. We play the 1 driver as well, so. Gamma's a fantastic card, and we don't, and I'll get into this when we go to the spells, but we don't ever have a risk of banishing the driver, so our Gamma is almost always live. Because of some choices we made in our extra deck as well, we can resolve our Rescue Cat turn 1, and if we don't get interrupted through our Gamma, we can make a Lambda and then hold the Gamma in hand. That lets us do other plays as well, so it does open up a lot of combo lines, and there is some synergy in our deck that's not inherent. We play 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Ash is like decent, right? It's like a good card in general. It does hit most decks in the format at some point. Against Virtual World, you can hit a lot. Against Sky Striker, you hit Engage, which is the only card you should be hitting with this card. Against Tri-Brigade Zoo, you hit Nerval. Against Tritron, you can hit Alpha. There's a lot of cards you can hit in the format with Ash, so just we want to have usually 2 hand traps in our opener. And if we have 2 hand traps, then usually it's hard for our opponent to play, and then we can easily play through their board, or we set up our board while having 2 hand traps as well. So Ash is really good for that. Like, the card does a lot of work in that regard. Next, we play 3 copies of Ghost Spell. In many instances, Ghost Spell actually overperforms over Ash Blossom, which is why I maxed out on it. Now, Ghost Spell is great because in the mirror match, you can hit Revolt, you can hit Shark Cannons, you can Call by the Grave, you can hit DD Crows, you can hit Reborn cards that your opponent might play against the Invoke matchup if they don't have a Meltdown setup. You can hit Schism, you can hit Invocation. The card is really strong, whether you're going first or second. So, and again, it does give us like kind of blanket coverage the same way that Ash Blossom does. Like, all our hand traps are like almost always live against most of the meta, which is why we want to play this ratio and why we want to play it as is. And I do believe that if you do, oh yeah, Ghost Spell also hits Tritrons when they're in the graveyard. You get the Ritual Spell if you really need to. Like, the card just gives you a lot of freedom. And most of one of the coolest things about this deck is usually where you do hand trap is it's a difference between like a really good player and like a poor player, and usually your success with the deck, it depends on that. So we play the 3 copies of Ghost Spell. Again, just hand traps that they're not necessarily high impact, but they do have a breadth of possibilities. And then for the 1 copy of DD Crow. Crow is really strong just because we can search it, and Crow on Engage is really cool, but also like, if you play against Strikers turn 1 is really poor, so they'll go like Hayate, even if they go second, they go Hayate, dump Anchor, Gari add back Anchor. You can just Crow the Anchor there, you don't have to play through a Disruption, you don't have to play through a Forbidden Chalice at that point. So Crow does slow down a lot of decks in the format, even against Salamangreat. You can hit Spinnies, you can hit Gazelles, you can hit Jaguars. Against Drytron, you can just hit the Drytron out of the grave, and the Mirror, you can knock out a name so they don't have, so they have 1 less name to actually play the deck. Card's just great. Even against Virtual World, obviously you can hit the Shinglong. It's not that great against Virtual World, but honestly, the card is usually free when we do combo with it. And honestly, it's not too bad to draw just because it is a live hand trap, and because it is a winged beast, you can always discard it off Karass or banish it later in your grave. And going first, if you have a Crow, your opponent hand traps you can Crow, get rid of their hand trap, and just load your grave up with 1 more name. Usually you're missing that 1 more name to be able to play. So there are niche instances where that comes up. Because it is searchable, and I think that its impact still has to be decided on how the meta shapes up, I think just the 1 is fine for now. That's it for our monster count. Again, it's 12 Tri-Brigades, 3 Rescue Cats, and then just a bunch of hand traps to help us carry you through games. Now we go to the spells. It's very light on spells and traps, very monster dense deck. We play the 3 copy of Tenki. In our deck, Tenki only functions as extra copies of Fractal, but Fractal plus Cat ends you on some crazy stuff, so we want to max out on this. And really, there's nothing else that we want to play, because for the most part, the benefit of this deck is you have access to kind of almost everything you want, because we play cards like this, as well as, the drawing of Fairjet, as well as Bearbrum. There's tons of ways to access your deck, so just making sure that you have access to your Tri-Brigade engine is how you're going to win. So this guarantees us getting access to our Tri-Brigade engine, and by itself, it'll dump the graveyard with 3 names plus get us a Karass, right? So this will search Fractal, Fractal will dump Kit, Kit will dump Nerval, Nerval will add Karass. We've got 4 Tri-Brigade names there. You can normal Karass and you can start playing, or you can search another Kit, whatever you need after the Fractal resolve. So although it immediately gets us the Fractal, through Fractal, it gets us through any Tri-Brigade that we want. So the card is insane. We don't really need to explain. Thank you. And then obviously it has a synergy with Double Dragon Lords, where you can just send it on field and it's just a free send. We play 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. Now I was going between Prosperity and Desires for a very long time. I decided that well, first, not having the random risk of banishing my driver or banishing too many of a single piece when it comes up in grind games. The prosperity just seemed to work out better for me. And then when the list happened and we had Striker come back, the craziest thing about prosperity is post side, being able to banish the top 6 cards of your deck and or excavate the top 6 cards of your deck and dig 6 cards deep for a side card, which have such huge impact on the way the game is played. Prosperity is nuts for that. And there's a lot of things that you can do with prosperity. You can get the Gamma, maybe it'll give you protection for your cat. You can get the Call by the Grave, which we do play, to give you protection for the cat. It can get you the missing name. I'd rather choose between 6 cards or even 3 cards than just have 2 random cards. I know that's crazy, but like I would prefer the guaranteed I'm getting something that I need over a strict +1. This isn't like Virtual World where like we want a strict +1 just because all our effects require discarding and things like that, but this lets us get what we're missing. Prosperity is discarding insane. Then we go over to the 1-ups. Play the 1 Call by the Grave. Card's nuts. It hits a bunch of hand traps and helps us play through disruptions that our opponent sets up. And the card's insane. We'd play more if we could, but obviously it's limited. Then we play the 1 copy of the Foolish Burial. I think that if you're going to be playing Almirage in the extra deck, which we do, and you can normal Nerval, you can normal Kit, and you can start going into lines like that. This often functions similarly to Fractal without using our Fractal. So we can go with this, dump the Kit, dump the Nerval will add us Keras or will add us a Fractal or any other name. It helps us get another name in hand for our Keras to extend. It helps us get another normal summon. So this kind of works in similar ways to Tenki without forcing us to resolve our Fractal first. The card's really strong. I also wanted to fit in a Monster Reborn. I didn't really know what to cut. It might be the Crow, but the card's really underrated, and I do expect to see more Tri-Brigade lists play this. That's it for the spells. We'll go right into the traps. The traps themselves, I believe 3 of them are up for debate, and that's the 3 infinite impermanents. Again, it's another hand trap. It hits a lot of good cards in the format. It'll stop Appaloosas. It'll stop cards that are usually protected if your opponent has a chain block. Like this really gets around a lot of them. For example, in Tri-Brigade, it's really easy to chain block our effects, and Imperm can usually hit the on-field effect if we need to. It can force out negates. It can prevent Savage from really equipping. Like there's a lot of utility to it. Personally, I think that you can make an argument for this to be Solemn Strike, for example, and I do think that's really strong. It's just that against Drytron going second, this is really good to hit the Fafnir, so stop that send, so even stop the Diviner is really powerful. So Imperm is just, again, most of our cards are just generally good, whether we go first or second, and it's just like, they're above average, which is what this deck is, and so we're just trying to beat our opponent with consistency as well as playing above average cards. And so that's Imperm. Again, you can play Strikes. I don't know. I think that Imperm is tested really well for me. We play the 2 copies of Tri-Brigade Revolt. Because we do play the Prosperity, we don't have a risk of banishing 2, or banishing extra copies. So I think that the 2 copies is perfectly fine. Prosperity will usually make it so that we don't ever risk like running out of Revolts. You only really need 2 to resolve. Like after you resolve 2, the game's probably decided one way or another. So we do play the 2 copies, and of course there's different combo lines on if you do draw the Revolt versus if you don't. And so yeah, just the 2 copies of the Revolt. Card's insane. Return from the different dimension. Plus triggers all the effects of your Tri-Brigades. So yeah, that's usually what we want to end on. Then we play the 1 copy of Imperial Order. Card's a huge sack, and whatever, like we play like 6 spells, 7 spells I think. And so whatever we resolve this, 8 spells. And whatever we resolve this card, whatever deck we resolve this against, chances are we're going to win against Sky Striker, against the Adagnister deck, against Drytron. They don't have access to ritual spells. They're forced to go into a Phoenix and like do things like that. Card's nuts, and even if like you flip it against like the Mirror, if it turns out, if you do it in response to a Tenki or a Pop card, it's really good there. Honestly, the card just overperforms. It's Order. Like, I think you definitely have to main it. And again, it is a win button. So if we see it against Striker, matchup's over at that point. And a lot of decks right now, like the spell cards they play are all consistency based. So usually resolving Order, flipping Order up, means that you're turning off their engine, which means you're only playing against like generic cards. So it's pretty solid. That's it for the main 40 cards. I'm not gonna play more because again, we are playing a very consistent deck, or we're trying to play a very consistent deck. No upstart, because we play Prosperity obviously, but yeah, I'm very happy with the main deck. There are a few changes. Again, I think you could put in a Pro, or you could cut a Pro, you can put in Strikes, put in a Reborn, but for the most part, I think the deck is very solid. Now, go into the extra deck for the Link 1, we play the Almirage. Almirage is there to help us kind of unbrick our hands by normalling a Kit or a Nerval and linking into an Almirage. There are issues where it being a Cyber, so once we're under the Tri-Brigade restriction, we can't use it to link summon, but it's fine if you can just tribute it off and target one of your other monsters and free up a zone, plus give you some protection. So it's like a necessary evil. The card is still solid. Next, we played 2 copies of Bearbrum. Bearbrum is really the reason I wanted to play the deck, just because it does search Revolt, and that's just such an insane card as a win button. We do play the 2 copies because in slower grind games, the second Bear Brum will come up in the instance that, okay, you search the first Revolt, your opponent outs it. Let's say you had to hard make, you couldn't hard make this, you have to special it out with your Tri-Brigade effect, and you need to go into the second one to be able to search the second Revolt to really close out those grindier games. And the format is getting to a point where it is a lot grindier than before, so we do need to be able to go long. And again, because we play Prosperity, we can always banish an extra one if we think that it won't ever come up. Card's really strong. Bear Brum, again, one of the reasons to play the deck. Then we go into Farragut. In the Cat build, Farragut is insane, because in the Cat build, Rescue Cat turns into Farragut with also a Tri-Brigade in hand, which means Farragut plus Rescue Cat lets us turn Farragut lets us turn Rescue Cat into an Appaloosa. The draw effect is really strong for sculpting our hand and fixing that, and the card is really strong. Again, like, this is the thing, we play 2 of each of these because this is the link you're usually going to go into, and if you need to link Shurag off into something, like, this is probably your best bet. It's more generic than Bear Brum is, because it requires just Beast Warriors and or Winged Beast or Beast. So whereas this is 2 Tri-Brigades. Yeah, the card's insane. Now there is a restriction with Bear Brum, but usually, like, when we have Bear Brum, after we're linking the Bear Brum, that is like the last generic monster that we're going to use. We're gonna go into, like, use Bear Brum, link it into an Appaloosa, or use Bear Brum, link it into like an access code to go for game kind of thing. And whereas Farragut doesn't have that effect, and again, the draw sometimes is better than the search. If you already got the Revolt, then you can just go into Farragut, special out the Tri-Brigade, link into, or use the Tri-Brigade effect, summon out double Dragon Lords, make this into a Shurag, and there's just like tons of stuff you can do to get a draw off of that. So, and the conflict with Prosperity doesn't usually come up because you'd rather get the Prosperity search anyway than this draw, so the draw's a nice bonus effect. And because you hard make it so often, you can just draw on your opponent's turn. But that's it for the Tri-Brigade links too. Then we play the 1 copy of Lambda. Lambda's nuts, right? Because if you have Gamma in hand and you have Cat, you can always just normal Cat effect, summon out the 2, go into Lambda and hold the Gamma in your hand if your opponent interrupts you, and then continue your lines there. Like, you can make the Lambda here, put an Appaloosa down in the main monster zone. So there's tons of cool things that Lambda lets you do. Also, Lambda's, for the most part, generic. You can't use it with tokens, but if you get Kaijus, you can just link away the Kaijus into a Lambda, just to turn your hand trap live. The card is really strong, and again, like, if these cards don't come up, or you don't think they're going to come up in the matchup because you've already gone through your Gamma or whatever reason, this can always just get banished on Prosperity. And I think for the most part, you only really need a few core cards in your extra, and so this is just nice to have for the utility. Then we'll play the Ancient Warriors, double Dragon Lords. We just play the 1. I think that this card should actually be bumped up to 2 because in testing, this card's insane. I always want to have double Dragon Lords even over cards like Appaloosa. Dragon Lords is insane. This is one of our interrupts, and it's one of the best interrupts that we can have. It turns tanky into free bounce. Usually it protects our Appaloosa, so Appaloosa can usually get more than 1 negate off, which other decks kind of struggle with, but this just lets us do that. And the Dragon Lords is just nuts. Like, again, this is what we're going to be ending on for the most part. Next, we play the 1 copy of Asa. Asa's here for cards like Contact C, and like, it gives you a very free Appaloosa, right? If you get Contact C, link to Asa, bring back the Contact C, just link that away again. Like, so the card is really strong, and then in our deck it's really easy to just hard make it, and the Mirror can do some crazy stuff too, like bring back their Tri-Brigade monster, their Karas, use Karas's effect. So Asa is just a generic 2. This could be the 2nd copy of Double Dragon Lord. I'm just testing this because I know locally there's a lot of people that play Tri-Brigade and they play similar style decks. Like, there's a lot of Adamantipator, and this is really good against that deck as well. So yeah, Asa is really strong. When it dies, we can search a Karas, which is always good. I think we can search Cat as well. So but again, this is like 50-50. I'm still just testing this and getting feelers for this card. That's all for the link 2s. Now we play the 1 copy of Rugal. Rugal's sick. Rugal lets you revive. That's the craziest thing for him. And he is a generic 3, which is relevant when we have like a Link 2 monster, like a Link 2 Tri-Brigade, or like a Bear Brum and another Tri-Brigade monster. We can link it up into a Rugal, or a Farragut, link it up into a Rugal. So it does help us ladder. And the effect to revive is also decent because on our opponent's turn, if we're forced to revolt early, Rugal can help us trigger our Shurag by special summoning a monster. And then if they don't out that monster, we can just add it back to our hand. So this card does help in grind games. It's just, again, like a very, very solid card, which is what our deck is all about. And finally, we'll play the last Link 3, which is the Doom Eagle. I don't know how to say the first name. Doom Eagle's really strong against Sky Striker. You can shuffle back Ray, against Salad, against Drytron. You can always just shuffle back cards from their graveyard. And then this ladders into Access Code very easily. Gives us a Wind Link, which again gives us another free pop with it. So the card's really good. And in some instances, like if against Striker, for example, if they have a weak turn 1 and they have Ray Engrave, like a standard Striker turn 1, they have Ray Engrave, you can shuffle back Ray. This goes up 4,800, which is a lot of damage. And against some other decks, you can just pass the Doom Eagle if you're playing against Drytron, for example, where Double Dragon Lords might not be as strong, potentially. So you can just play this and shuffle back the Drytron that's in graveyard. It's insane. It's a staple, and I can't wait for our full printing. Next, we play the 2 copies of Shurag. our big boss monster, this is what we're summoning off of Revolt and banishing our opponent, and we're also just summoning this turn 1 if we resolve Cat to go into the search effect to be able to add a Tri-Brigade to our, or a Wing Beast or Beast to our hand, so we can search another copy of Cat, we can search any of the Tri-Brigades, we can search DD Crow. The card is, again, very, very strong, and I think that there is a legitimate case to bump this up to 3, especially because we are playing Pure. Some of the cards that you could cut is potentially the second Bearbrum, because you only really need the 1. You could cut the Asa, you could cut the Lambda, there's another card we play that you could cut as well, so there's a lot of freedom in the extra deck, I think. It's just that I've seen Lambda being played, and like I thought that was really cool, and I decided to test it myself, and it came out to be really strong. Same with the Asa. So sure, non-targeting banish helps us chain block our other Tri-Brigade effects. Card's crazy, and it floats. They all float. Next for link 4 is we play Appaloosa, which is our boss monster for negates on turn 1. This is what we're going to make to interrupt our opponent. Appaloosa is really strong in this format against a variety of decks outside of like essentially a striker, but it's good against like really everything else. Against Drytron, they struggle. In the mirror, they struggle to out this. Against Salamangreat, they can struggle to out this. Adamantimator Prank Kids themselves negate the initial Prank Kid. It's harder for them to play. Against Virtual World, you just negate all the hand effects. Like, Appaloosa is nuts. We don't need to explain this. And honestly, I was playing with 2 Appaloosa before, and in some games it did come up, but that was when I was a little bit worse with the deck, when I didn't really know how to kill my opponent without respecting Nib and things like that. And then, speaking of killing our opponent, we play the copy of Access Code Talker. It's very easy to summon this with a Link 3, because we just go Tri-Brigade, summon out Doom Eagle shovels something back, link the Doom Eagle and the Tri-Brigade off into Access Code, and that's Access Code for 5300. There's also instances where we're linking away Access Code. We're summoning Access Code by linking away a Shureg, which gives us 6,000 attack in the Access Code, so it's very easy to push for gaming. It's like very, very easy. Even with just our other monsters, like we don't even need this, but like with Access Code, this is your guarantee. This is I want to win the game button, and you can usually do it under 5 summons when play swings back to you in turn 2. And our last card in the extra deck is Omega, because after we resolve Gamma, we want to be able to make something with Omega. And resolving Gamma on your turn with Omega just essential. It's an FTK. It's really hard for our opponent to deal with that. Again, there are some flex spots in this extra. I think that that would be these. The second Bearbrum. Yeah. So these are like the 4 flex spots that you could play. You could cut these for other cards. You could play third Shure. You could play second Double Dragon Lords, which I would definitely recommend. And then these 2 could be 2 of anything else. I think the deck has a lot of flexibility right now, and there's a lot of space to be played in it. So that was it for the Tri-Brigade list, guys. So we're done. And so that was the video. That was the deck profile, at least. Let me know what you think about the list and what you would change. Obviously, there were some things that I mentioned where I did think you could change. I do think the deck is positioned in a pretty decent spot this metagame. Yeah, so that's Blue from Ather Gaming, signing out. Peace.